Welcome. This is Shamtoli Hutt. I'm the editor and attorney at Law at the Margins. I'm excited to have this conversation today facilitated by Victor Naro, who is the project director at UCLA's Labor Center. And we're very honored to also have Victor Naro as a board member at Law at the Margins. A little bit about Law at the Margins before I hand over facilitating this conversation on community care in the times of political crisis. For those who are not familiar, Law at the Margins is a law and media organization. It uses the tools of law and advocacy in media, including these webinars, to lift up issues of social justice. This particular conversation is part of a new series called Faith Justice. Through Faith Justice, we want to explore the relationship between faith, law, and spirituality and its connections. And thanks to Victor, in January, we hosted our first chat with Reverend and attorney Usan Hall. Please check that out. I put a link on the side chat box on embodied solidarity. We invite activists who use an ethical and faith justice framework to write and contribute to the series, and we welcome all of you that are watching and participating to do that. And you can send Victor pitches and ideas at editors@lawatthemargins.com. So what we're going to do today, as we know that the context in which we live has dramatically changed, but not changed in some many ways. Communities of color, immigrants, Muslims have always experienced turbulence in terms of their lives. But there's a particular nature in the way that the Trump administration has created increased anxiety, fear, and stress because of the unpredictability of status, because of those executive orders. And so we heard our communities and activists. Victor heard them and saw them to be in fear, anxiety, and stress. And so we thought that this chat was timely to speak to that conversation. How do we, in a time of crisis, while we're moving, mobilizing, organizing, activating, how do we engage in self and community care? What do those terms even mean? There's a lot of debate about those terms. Yeah. This session was grounded in a quote by Audre Lorde, that the act of self-care and self-preservation is a political work as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and ground our conversation there. There's a lot of discussions, and we hope that after Victor's presentation, a little bit about his work, his book, that I invite our guests to share as well their strategies. We do have with us S.Nadia Hussein, who's a co-director of Moms Rising, will also be sharing a little bit of her strategies of self-care and community care. So I encourage folks to chat with me while you're listening to Victor on the side, and also let me know if you'd like to participate and also share some of your thoughts. So with that, I'd like to just introduce and bring on to the discussion Victor. Thank you, Victor.
Thank you so much, Shamtoli, and thank you for bringing us on the margin. That's a great space to have this kind of dialogue. And the Faith Justice Initiative is a component of Law on the Margin, and through Shamtoli's guidance and leadership, I made the bold steps of creating this space so that we can talk about this concept of how to connect faith and justice from the perspective of self-care, community care, how we can become a healthier movement for justice ourselves in the way we work collectively. The reason why I came out about doing this kind of work, I've been doing social justice work for 35 years now. The last 15 years or so with the UCLA Labor Center, and my focus has been on immigrant rights and labor rights as well, the connection between immigration and labor, and working with different campaigns, different organizations, different communities of color. In the process of all this work, I encountered major burnout where I really exhausted myself emotionally, spiritually, and physically, to the point where I was hospitalized a couple of times. And the last time I was hospitalized around 5 years ago, I found myself concerned about really what am I doing to myself, and also how my not taking care of myself is impacting others. especially people that are impacted by my work in social justice. And I started writing about it, reflecting, and I came out with my book, Live in Peace, which is an attempt to get others, encourage others to think about these issues of burnout and how to be more healthier as an activist, and how to make each other healthier, how we co-power each other, how we uplift each other in a way that's healthier, make us as strong as a movement. And I've been challenging us, myself and others, to really think about uh, dismantling what is very entrenched in the left, which is the martyr syndrome, the syndrome of like you work until you really can no longer work physically and emotionally, and see that as a badge of honor. We need to dismantle that because I think well, it causes people to get sick. It causes people to get unhealthy, impacts our families, it impacts also around us. And we really have no use as an activist if we're not healthy. I think we are best when we're healthy, when we have awareness, we have focus, but we also feel like physically and spiritually and emotionally we have sustainability and we have the ability to fight the long fight, which brings us to what's different with the Trump administration. With a month and a half into his administration, uh, and already we're feeling the anxiety, the fear, the burnout of a month and a half of relentless attack by Donald Trump. His strategy is to do just that to us. And in the process of doing that, we're going to find ourselves not healthy as a movement, and especially it's going to impact our ability to fight back. We have, the reality is, if unless something unforeseeable happens, like he's impeached, we have close to 47 months left of really fighting this fight against the injustices of Donald Trump and his administration. And I think that we're going to see more attacks. They're going to increase on a daily basis. You know, we're going to see attacks not just on immigrants. The criminalization of youth is going to continue. An attack on poverty, an attack on the environment, an attack on every sector of social justice work. So now's the time, I think, for us to reflect, to share best practices, to really how to integrate best practices of spirituality, of mindfulness, of how we take care of ourselves and how can we take care of each other, and to be in solidarity with each other so that we're all interconnected. The movement for justice is intersectional, inclusive, and we don't experience divisiveness among ourselves. So I think now is the time to begin this dialogue because we need to look at sustainability in the way we fight back.
Victor, I know that you've written and done workshops on really grounding what do you mean about self-care? What does that look like on a day-to-day? As you know that a lot of activists will say, I don't have time for that. Or communities that are already impacted, poor communities, working class communities. Well, that sounds great, Victor, to do meditation, but you know, I don't have time to do that. I'm raising children, I'm raising my family, I'm going to work. How would you respond to that sort of pushback around this sort of conversation? Because I know that you've actually done workshops and really thought concretely about that. So maybe you can share that, and then we can open it up to some of our participants.
So I'm really focusing on integration of these best practices into our daily activities. For example, we have to, in the work for justice, we communicate with each other all the time. Everything is done collectively. So I've been doing workshops on active listening and love and speech in the way we interact with each other. We're going to be interacting with one another in the work for justice. How do we integrate these concepts like active listening, mindful speech, heart-to-heart communication, courageous dialogue, when we need to engage in courageous dialogue? In the process of working together, it's not we're creating something new, it's how to integrate into our already existing work. In campaign work, for example, many of us are involved in campaign work. In the process of a campaign strategy agenda, we always do check-ins. We always check in about the deliverables, the tasks. When we have a major activity, we evaluate in the process of doing these check-ins, these evaluations, these meetings that we are having anyway. why not integrate a space to talk about, are we taking care of ourselves? Are we like doing what we can to engage in collective self-care, that we're taking care of ourselves, looking out for each other? It's not creating another layer of work, it's integrating it into the already existing layer of work. I do workshops on triggers. So activists do get triggered a lot because we're so given of ourselves. We give so much of ourselves for the sake of others that we're often vulnerable to being triggered, something that throws us off balance. So I do these workshops on how to use mindfulness practice when you're off balance, how to reground yourself in a matter of seconds. It's not taking time away from the work to do an hour of a meditation session. It's at the present moment, at that point in time when you get triggered. It could be in a meeting, it could be in a workshop, it could be in a major street action. If you get triggered at that moment, what can you implement to reground yourself? And I think that those little simple steps matter a lot for the health and well-being of our movement.
Great, thank you so much. I, in the chat box, linked to a couple of pieces that Victor has written around incorporating spirituality into movement work, and also a great piece that I had found by out of the Oakland Peace Center. And I wanted to just kind of mention a couple of tips there before I then invite Nadia to share some of her thoughts on this particular topic. A number of the things that Victor mentioned, I just want to lift up is, instead of doing something outside of what you're already doing, integrate certain practices into your day-to-day. So it's not requires you to sort of exit your life, right? So from a lot of us, that's not a privilege that we have, to be able to leave, take a retreat. And so there are lots of steps that I think Victor mentioned in terms of meeting, the opening, checking in, starting, and the check-in. I do that regularly. It does not take a lot of time. If you give a check-in of 1 minute, I'm part of and went to a group called the Law and Social Change Jam, and we do that regularly as part of meetings. So that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. A couple of other things that I wanted to just lift up, which are collective oriented and not as much individual oriented, which is that in faith traditions of Asia and South Asia, meals are taken together, meals are prepared together. So think about in your community, because everything that we're talking about in terms of community and self-care isn't only about the individual. It's about how you are as part of a community, a neighborhood. And so think about things that can be shared. And so a lot of the stress is really that we are putting so much pressure on the individual. So for example, shared meals. Organizations that I've seen that are working class led in New York City, I've never gone to an organizing meeting where there wasn't a potluck shared meal. And that all of the workers come and bring a meal together, so that that evening, while they're meeting and planning and strategizing, they don't have to worry about meals. Particularly for women, childcare is provided. Or even if there's not provided, you can bring your children to those spaces. There are many activist spaces, and this is something I experienced as a mother, that I can't bring my children to because it's not oriented for children. So making your space kind of open to and allowing for certain things, so meals, care, bartering. Not everything has to be done through transaction and money. A lot of services have been bartered. I've given sort of legal support in exchange for yoga or other kind of meditation services. So how can we help each other and skill share? So these are the ways that we already want to build a collective community. So think about what can you offer to your community that might relieve and alleviate their sort of burden, or what you might do to sort of take on. So I just wanted to kind of also give some strategies in our movement work that are collective oriented. And so some of these ideas, I think I posted in an article on the chat, but thinking both not just individually, but collectively. So with that, I wanted to shift to invite folks, if you want to share some your own strategies. But before I do that, I want to give Victor an opportunity to maybe some closing thoughts before I open it up, and then he'll come back to kind of draw up some summary.
I mean, just to follow up on that comment about sharing, it's this is a chance for us to grow and develop as activists. And like today, for example, I find myself allowing myself to learn from a lot of Muslim activists, not just about solidarity issues that impact them, about like the teachers of Islam, like the spirituality of Islam, how to embrace that spirituality, because when you look at different spiritual faiths, you find common elements of compassion, understanding, leading with love, how to transform anger and hate into positive energy. You really find all that in a lot of many faith traditions, and this is a good chance for us to grow and develop, to really reach out to each other. Um, I think the concept of soul care community sometimes it's siloed into Christian traditions and traditions of Buddhism, but I think there's so much to learn and develop in how there's so much for us to learn and embrace, and I think that creates radical solidarity, and I think this opens up so many doors for us. We just have to allow ourselves to go out there and really embrace all that diversity that we can have access to.
Great, thank you. I think that's a wonderful segue, that we all draw from our respective faith traditions in sustaining ourselves, and also non-religious faith traditions. And so I'd like to invite Nadia Hussein, who you see on the screen. She's part of Director of Maternal Justice for Moms Rising, and also Director of Bangladesh American Women's Development Initiative in New Jersey, and also as a Muslim woman, to share some of her thoughts. So thank you, Nadia. And for those of you who are listening and would like to share things that have worked for you in your movement work, just let me know and I can invite you to join onto the screen. So I'm just going to give the mic to Nadia.
Thank you, Shamtoli, for convening this and for convening a very important topic. And, you know, one of the questions you asked on the group chat was, why is this of interest? And we all know oftentimes in movement work, or if you work for a nonprofit, burnout is something that is just talked about, I feel like, constantly. As I've worked in nonprofits for almost 7 to 8 years, that conversation has been there from the beginning. But I think that for me personally, it really didn't come as much to a head until this actual past election. And as Shamtoli said, a lot has changed, and then obviously some things haven't changed. There have been things that have been going very wrong and very unjust for a very long time, and whoever comes to a certain office, you know, they didn't start that, right? But I think for me, I started to feel kind of overwhelmed because I didn't realize this, but I think a lot of people started really gravitating to me because I'd done movement work for so long. That was seen as an expert, which I definitely don't think I am. I just do what I do and try to learn as much as I can. And I think it was, for me, I had a lot of stress from just the environment of what was changing, and being Muslim background, having a Latino husband, having a son, and living in deep Trump country. All of our neighbors have these signs, and our next door neighbor had a handwritten Trump sign on his window. So, you know, it was very stress inducing, and also wanting to fix things, I think. So it was definitely a challenge. And for me, what I found, and again, it's personal. It's not one size fits all. I think we're all very different people, and it's very important to think of what is it that gives you strength and that helps you take care of yourself. So for me, I am someone who really values human connection in terms of I'm more social. I do have some extroverted qualities, and I like to, if I don't talk to people, if I just kind of hold myself off, I tend to feel very isolated very quickly. So for me, making time, and I'm a new mother. I have a 2-year-old son, which sometimes motherhood can be a very isolating experience. So on top of being in Trump country, being a new mother, I really saw that calling my friends, bouncing ideas off you, having friends and people who are actually not part of the movement, who aren't even necessarily activists, and you can of course confide in friends who are also in the movement. But I think having people you could be like your people who you could bounce things off of, for me has been very useful. Just talking, even if it's not about anything that leads to work or helps me out in any way professionally or social justice wise. Just being able to relax and talk to people, for me, talking it out with people, friends and family, is very important. Shamtoli mentioned sharing meals. During times that are very tough, I know for me, I am very lucky to have a positive household. I do have a caring, mutually respectful relationship with my husband. My mother lives with us. I have my son. We have a household that does bring me peace, which I realize is something I'm very lucky to have, and is a privilege that not everybody can say. But sharing meals with my family, even if it's for an hour, shutting down internet, getting off, just not being wired in all the time, that has been very useful for me. And in community spaces with the Bangladeshi American Women's Development Initiative, we always have a lot of food. Shamtoli mentioned with organizing workers that was always it just came as part of the culture and part of the work. And really, I think all of us, especially coming from communities of color, coming from a variety of cultures and backgrounds and social classes, there are a lot of things of value that we can bring. And I think sometimes when you come into a certain paradigm, maybe those things aren't as valued innately, right? And that, I think, is stressful. I think that itself can help lead to burnout. So I think bringing those parts of you to a space, having, valuing and integrating cultural outlets for stress, whether that's meditating, whether that's eating together, whether, our cultures have a lot of information to give us. And so I'd say don't discount that. And I think it's good for oneself to connect to some of the cultural traditions and even background norms that we have that have been there for a long time, to heal and to share with a community, and also keep incorporating that and having the space, or trying to work to build that space, and have it be intentional and have it be something that is of value, just as valuable as bringing in funding or having a great strategic plan. What's the point of that if people are burning out or not feeling happy or really not feeling supported in the work, and maybe even leaving the work because of it?
Great, thank you so much, Nadia, for those perspectives. I want to, at this point, encourage others who want to share their experiences, what draws you to this particular topic. This topic has actually drawn a lot of interest, and someone that I've learned from Victor more about this, it really surprised me how much this is needed. I want to also welcome DeAndrea Lauder. She mentioned that she's from Ready to Work. She's a coordinator for the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. And what I thought was interesting in the comments that was written is that they're working on issues that allow their worker members to deal with the trauma of discrimination and just trauma generally. I think when we're working with impacted communities, the communities are experiencing the legal system through trauma. And so creating these spaces is really also critical to that work. And so I just wanted to share that comment that was raised. If any of our participants would like to share some thoughts about their work, otherwise I'm going to just hand it back to Victor to talk about some other emerging issues that are coming up in terms of community care that he's been seeing in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so I want to thank you again, Nadia, for those great insights. I'm an introvert, so my self-care relies on me to be able to do hard listening. So that's the gift I give to people, not so much because we all are different. So when I give my hard listening, then people feel that gift from me, and that brings up the issue. I think the challenges that come up is that, and as you both know, Nadia and Shamtali and others, is um, the demands of the work and the stress. It's always there, and it's always there, and I actually think it's going to increase because of the Trump factor.
We must have lost Victor in the technology, just to show you that at the end of the day, human connection is the best. So we'll wait for Victor to come back onto the chat. In the meantime, again, I want to encourage everyone to use the chat box on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, to share how you're being connected to this particular issue. We see some writing a little bit from Unyang, who talks about working around basically burnout and using sort of yoga, and she sort of shared from that perspective. We talked about individual tips, very concrete, in terms of self-care. We talked a little bit about sort of community-oriented, how we can even change the way that we do organizing as well. So that when we look at the structures of our work, take a scan of your organization. Are you allowing for individuals within your movement work to be able to co-direct organizations, to not have most of the sort of the burdened decisions rest on a few individuals? Is there a leadership or work structure that shares the work? I mean, some of these things can actually be corrected also through the structures that we create. In many ways, we replicate the structures that exist in broader society, which is to individualize, and Victor talked about this, the martyr, the one activist, right, that's going to kind of carry us along. And I think if we perpetuate that, then we're least likely to engage in community care. So we talked about collective structures. So if Victor, let me see if Victor can join on again. Sure what happened. But I do know Victor was about to talk about a little bit how another aspect of the community care is how when we all compete for our issues. And so instead of looking at the movement in terms of how we might be able to work together and be more inclusive, and to perhaps maybe go for joint funding, that in Los Angeles, one of the things that he's been observing is that given the climate and the pressure, that a lot of groups are kind of getting into their silos of their work and not necessarily working across. And so the community care that he's been talking about is to encourage us to work a little bit together across nonprofits, across our organizations, so that we can also share some of the stresses around that and greater collaboration in some of the work. This is a different way in which I've heard the community care discussion, and so I really welcome that and hope that Victor would be able to write a little bit more on this topic. But again, at this time, we're going to probably wrap up within sort of the hour. So I encourage folks to ask a question or to perhaps use the chat feature to raise some of the issues. And so one of the things I see a chat from Amanda Sen, who's a law professor as a public defender. And I'm going to see if I can invite her into share a little bit about going from being a public defender to a law professor and strategies around community care and mothering. Great. We have Amanda. Okay, great. So I'm going to read what Amanda wrote. For those to join the screen, you do have to have your camera and device on for the program. So Amanda writes, "Hi Amanda, I'm a law professor who burnt out as a family public defender last year, have 2 children. It's nice to hear from you, especially since I wasn't expecting to hear from other mothers at this time of the day. I'm finding it hard to find community where I live, having moved last year." And then also we welcome Linda Pollock with a project, My Daily Constitution, supports community dialogue about constitutional issues. And so very important, again, welcome Linda. Linda and I sort of worked in the past post 9/11 around the Constitution. So I don't know if I have Victor, Amanda and back, but also invite Andrea and also Nadia if you want to share questions about mothering. There's a lot of questions about mothering, community, and finding community. I think that that's a really hard thing, even in an area like New York City, where the assumption is that we do have so many people, but still I think finding community is really finding sort of a like-minded, aligned values folks. And so where are the spaces for that and how to kind of create that? So we have Nadia, Amanda. Great. Great. So maybe Nadia can speak to the issue regarding, I guess, what Amanda is talking about, which is being alienated in a community and finding kind of your like-minded folks.
So I think, and I just saw what you wrote, Amanda. And you know, I grew up in a very interesting environment. I grew up in kind of the Rust Belt in Pennsylvania. So I would say in my life, I am actually used to a very wide variety of people, not saying that if you're not super left, we can't get along, or if you're right wing, we can't, you know. So I've actually dealt with people from all walks of life. And I think that, you know, living in my community, I think initially, especially after everything happened with the elections, I was fearful. And I think that was a very valid response to what was happening. But sorry, my son's eating. But it's a very valid response. But, you know, it's funny because I feel like social media is such a double-edged sword. It can be like one of the reasons why you burn out, frankly. But for me, it can also be a sense of support. And I think that for me, it was a way to stay connected to people who aren't necessarily living in my neighborhood. But also another way I am is I'm kind of the kind of girl who likes to confront her fears or challenge herself. I'm a learn by fire type of person, for better or worse. And I actually went out and joined my town commission on economic development that was a way for me to get to know my community and not necessarily just judge my community, because I realized I'm also in New Jersey. So it is not, I'm not like in the deep heart of the deep South kind of thing, right? So, so that's one thing, is by getting to know my community and realizing that there is a variety of people. We have beautiful diversity in this town, and is that diversity uplifted? We have a Mexican community that lives here. We have some wonderful restaurants from that are owned by Thai people, that are owned by Mexican people from the Mexican community. So I think there's more than meets the eye everywhere, frankly. And so that's been a way for me to just be out there. Also, my Bangladeshi community is only 20 minutes away in Patterson, New Jersey, where my friend and I co-founded that Bangladeshi women's group. And I know that group is there if I need it. And even like last night I was at an event, and there's a cultural connection. So I think that I'm lucky that I do have access at least. And if I don't, I try to find places where I can, find that for myself.
Great. So I think I'm going to slowly try to wind down. So I'm going to encourage folks to write a little bit about some questions that you may have, things that have worked for you, and then I'm going to have Victor sort of close us out and share some of thoughts, and then also invite us to do some more engagement around this topic of faith justice. So I'm going to hand it back to Victor to kind of add some more of the conversation that you were seeing in Los Angeles, and then maybe sort of wrap up our chat for today.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got disconnected for a few minutes there. I was trying to follow the comments, but you know, I think that engaging in these kind of dialogue about self-care, community care does open us up to other kinds of dialogue, and I think it's all connected with this issue. I think, for example, Los Angeles, you know, in the process of moving for a sanctuary city to protect undocumented immigrants, it opened a dialogue for solidarity building. What does that mean? Like, to be inclusive, intersectional, so that we all don't get caught up in our silos and just focus on our poverty issue and at the expense of other issues. So we're trying to become more inclusive as a movement, because I think that's part of self-care and community care in the movement, is if we're inclusive enough that we really embrace all our issues together, and we're in this fight together, and we don't you know, quote unquote, throw some sector under the bus for the sake of moving another agenda forward, because that's what the system tries to do to us, and that's what the system does to us. That's what I think elected officials do to us, especially lawmakers. I think we got to stay united. We got to stay in deep solidarity, inclusive. We got to be remain strong to that commitment to be intersectional. And I think that's a type of collective community care that we have to embrace, especially today, because everybody's being attacked by this president. And in the process of all of us being attacked, the tendency is always for us to look out for our issue first at the expense of other issues. And this is, I think, what's happening with the labor movement on a national level, where some unions are actually meeting with Donald Trump. I think this is going to be a major challenge for the immigrant rights movement. So I think Los Angeles, we're trying to set a model of intersectionality and also inclusiveness to show that we're all united behind one common agenda, which is justice for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we would like to, I didn't see any questions from participants, maybe to just kind of have some closing thoughts and reflections, and then we can maybe wrap up for today. From Law at the Margins, as I mentioned in the beginning, Victor is leading us in a exploration of law, spirituality, and faith. And if anyone would like to contribute by writing or have other ideas on how we can bring out this conversation, please write to us at editors@lawatthemargins.com. And we'd love to hear from you. If you would like to have more focused and additional conversations on this topic on community care, let us know as well. We're open to that. So, and some things that I just wanted to throw out there, which I've used in my own work, activist work, which has been really helpful. I think Victor mentioned is a check-in group. So having one or two people that you're able to, that checks in with you, that's kind of their job, right? They sort of check in with you and you with them. And technology is really helpful, and I've been using WhatsApp group. And so a number of groups, moms and activists, where ooh, sorry, where we would actually just share what we're feeling for the day. And it doesn't require a response. Part of a feeling of alienation is that we're not able to express some of our viewpoints. So some of the WhatsApp group that I'm part of it's just, this is what happened, and then knowing that it's being heard by another group. And so this is something that I've used, and it's been really helpful, particularly when there are some moments where you're just trying to kind of process out something, but you don't want to go to a meeting. And we talked about a number of tips throughout the sessions. I won't repeat that. But I do want to then invite Victor to maybe sort of close out some things that we should be thinking about, prompts, and then sort of wrap up our session for today. I want to thank all of you for joining, and this will be recorded and will be shared and additional resources as well. So, Victor.
Yeah. So I think I use the concept of active listening, which is heart listening, how we embrace each other by listening from our hearts, give each other that kind of presence. And also mindful speech, like love and speech. It's how we lead the dialogue that we have every day with each other through love and speech, especially those moments when things don't go well. When things don't go well, there's a lot of stress, we're having a bad day, either something's not going well. That's what these concepts are most important. We're always breathing. We breathe in so much. We take advantage of breathing in and breathing out for the sake of surviving. But why not breathe in with this love and essence of that we all have to give, like mindfulness? We always are always in movement. We walk. Many of us have to walk to meetings, have to walk to destinations. Why not walk mindfully? Walk with that presence of giving of a spirit of a love to each other, and then also spaces, circles. Uh, Time to reflect ourselves and with each other. It's not creating another layer of work. It's integrating these concepts into the work they're already doing. And I think over a period of time, that shifts the culture of social justice work from a very competitive, model-centered culture that we find ourselves in to one that's embracing, that's really showing that we're trying to uplift each other and care for each other. We're not creating like a whole new uh, layer of work. We're just trying to integrate these principles of self-care and community care so that the culture begins to shift. And that's how we create sustainability, how we're there for each other, create sustainability, how we receive each other, we embrace each other. That's what I think it's going to take for us to be in this fight for the long run against the Donald Trumps of the world. So I thank everybody for joining in. I've been reading some great insights and comments, and I encourage everybody to continue in this dialogue. I think some relationships were made today with these comments that I've been reading from other folks. And I think, with this faith justice initiative, it's open for folks to get involved. If you want to write pieces and you can share with everybody, or if you come up with some other ideas about having these kind of interactive dialogue, we're open to exploring different ways of communicating with each other.
Yeah, and the other thing I just wanted to share is that we're not a sort of a huge group, and if anyone is interested in kind of initiating maybe this check-in group for us, that sort of participated. I know a number of you expressed in the chat sort of feeling a bit not finding the community, and this is technology can be helpful. So if someone is open to taking a leadership on that, Law at the Margins would welcome and support that. We are completely collaborative and voluntary at the moment. And so basically, if you come with an idea and want, we would support you collectively. So I want to just put that out there just because there were a number of folks who said that, kind of finding that connection might be helpful. And we're happy to facilitate that process. If folks are interested, just let us know. And thank you to Victor. The Faith Justice series came about because Victor reached out to me and said, I want to write about law and spirituality. And it spoke to me very deeply as someone who comes out of the Muslim faith, that the way in which I practice law, the way in which I engage in social justice is integrally related to my faith practice. But I also realize that it's not something that's familiar to everyone. So Victor and I are trying to, really promote this idea that it's not really about religion, and it's not really about necessarily any particular faith. It's about values, mission-driven, ethics-driven, faith-driven practices, and aligning those practices with our actions. And so, and when we do that, a good friend of mine said that burnout is really a reflection of misalignment of our values. And what she meant by that is that, when our back is hurting, it's because the chiropractor and straighten it. And when we're stressed from the movement, there's somewhere along the way that the values of community, of family, of justice are not aligning with our everyday. And so I think what Victor is talking about is, these little fixes that we can make in our day-to-day that can just readjust our practices to our values. And so I want to really take this moment to thank Victor for pushing and encouraging with his loving speech, this conversation for us to have this year. And Albert Garcia, who is behind the scenes and responsible for all the tech work. So with that, I'll have Victor have the last sort of, his words are always said and filled with radical love. So Victor, close us out.
Well, I think that your quote, burnout is the misalignment of our values, is probably the best way to end. And I think we should continue to connect and stay interconnected with each other. And I saw a lot of great posts from folks who participated today, and I think we should find ways to stay connected and continue embracing these values. That's going to help us to ensure that we have the sustainability that we are going to prevail in the long run against Donald Trump and others that are out to destroy our work for justice.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Thank you.